Welcome to the Why Music podcast, where we talk to independent artists about their journeys, the inspirations behind their music, and ultimately why they make music. This next artist is a Nashville based but Colorado native. Journeying through genres, he's covered everything from EDM to indie rock. Welcome, Luke.
Thank you. Appreciate it. That was a good intro.
Thank you. I always like to start with where your story with music all kind of kicked off.
Yeah, I think it really began sophomore year of high school. I think I asked my parents for Logic for Christmas and I got a little MIDI and then I started producing. Um, I was really inspired at that time by John Bellion. I remember watching those making of videos that he has on YouTube, and it's like I want to do that so bad. And then I saw him live, and then I was really into 21 Pilots at the time, and I'm lucky enough to be close to Red Rocks, so I saw their show at Red Rocks, and I think after that I was just fully in, and I just knew it was all I wanted to do, and started producing quite a bit. Um, by myself and then eventually with other people. And then, throughout my college career, it just kind of grew into just a lot of different side projects, a lot of gigs, and now I'm here.
I happened to see John Bellion open for 21 Pilots when they were actually it was oddly enough in Vegas. I've always been a
I
big
was at
John.
that show.
Really? In like
I was at
2016 or 2017?
16,
Wow.
2016. Yeah.
That's
I know.
that's that's wild.
I know.
I was a big John Bellion fan, and I was there for a soccer tournament, and one of my teammates was a big 21 Pilots fan, so we just went like after the tournament one day, and
Uh-huh.
that's it was yeah. He's awesome. He's one of my favorites. But what it like do you have like any sort of like music background prior to producing, or did you just kind of dive in without sort of, did you play an instrument? Like what was there any background leading up to the production?
There was the smallest amount. I just taught myself how to play piano.
Wow.
Um, and then after that, I remember I think I was in Florida at my grandparents' house and I heard this Lexus Christmas song that kept playing like as a commercial over and over again. And then I sat down at my grandma's piano and then I memorized it. And then I think after that I was like, oh, maybe if I could get one of these at home and then just learn other songs. Like I think that's initially what drew me in. And then, yeah, from there on out, it was just watching YouTube videos about like how to play this song, and then just kind of teaching myself from there on out. And then I picked up guitar after piano, and then, yeah, just kind of went from there.
Interesting. I can't even fathom that being from a like I grew up taking piano lessons. I can't fathom just diving right in, not having as much of a like a significant musical instrument background of any kind. Like good for you for just kind of teaching yourself and diving right into everything, because I could never. So
Thank you. Yeah.
um
I think I took one lesson. I took one lesson technically. And it was just really weird. I didn't like it. And
mhm.
then I was like, okay, I guess I'll just keep watching YouTube videos.
I mean, YouTube's got everything. You can teach yourself a lot of things from there. So it's
I
definitely
know.
doable. But it's crazy to think it's that just kind of shot into something that you actually really wanted to pursue, rather than like, I feel like people that sometimes learn things on YouTube are just like hobbyists at best. So it really just kind of
Hmm.
YouTube videos is really the source of it all.
I guess so, yeah.
Um, so when did you kind of in this whole timeline of things commit to, not just producing in general and putting things together, but really like decide to take it seriously and also pursue like your own personal project?
Um, that's a good question. I have like a lot of stuff under my own name,
Mm-hmm.
and that was just initially just kind of making stuff and putting it out and feeling confident about it. And then I started this new project, the Not Satire. Um, and that was just kind of a step forward, just wanted to like have a clean slate. And that was like a year ago, I think. But up until then, I don't know. I just released under my own name. And that was just the beginning of it.
I mean, whatever it takes to get you started, that's all that matters,
Yeah.
just getting it out there. That's sometimes the hardest part is it's just the starting of it all, but it kept going.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I
what made,
I think I
go ahead.
oh go okay. I was just gonna say I think initially it was just so easy to upload to SoundCloud, and that's really where I started, was
Mm-hmm.
just exploring SoundCloud, and then it became easier to put stuff on Spotify and like not that expensive. So I was like,
Yeah.
well, it seems like the industry's moving this way anyways. So
Yeah.
just hopped on board.
SoundCloud is as easy as it gets. You just throw the files on there and it loads right up.
Hmm.
It's nice. If only everything was that easy, right?
I know. I know.
What made you decide with the new Not Satire project? What made you decide to start that instead of continuing to just release things under your own name?
I think experimentation more than anything. I had seen kind of like how the Spotify algorithm worked with my other project, and I wanted to see if I could game it with a new project. And also just I feel like more creative freedom with my name not being attached. And I don't know why that is, but it seems like you can kind of do more things and maybe like, I mean, a lot of it is like being able to play some stuff off as a joke. It's like, no, it
Mhm.
is satire. Like some of it is satire. Um, but maybe not. I don't know.
Open to
So yeah,
interpretation.
yes, exactly. Yeah, just kind of a clean slate and a new aesthetic that I could work on.
I mean, I'm a big branding person, so from that, I mean, just I love to have things like separated based on kind of what it is like that, and if the other question I was going to ask is why not satire, but you kind of alluded to that with, it is it a joke? Is it not a joke? Like that's decide for yourself, like
Right.
the the world may
Yeah,
never know. So like having a
exactly.
different, it kind of allows you to kind of remove yourself from it in a sense of like not in like a distancing yourself from your own work, but like just kind of adding a little bit of distance between you and what you create so it's not like completely a part of. Do you get what I'm saying? Am I making any sense?
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And um I always thought like, no, I think attaching your like own name to a piece of work is, what the best artists do. It's like Kanye and well, at the time. And then like Sean Bellion and all these guys. I was like, yeah, it's just their names. And you know, and it's not that like I just think I see it as a different project. Like I'm still gonna release stuff under my own name for sure. Um, but I think it's easier to experiment with sound and not feel pigeonholed into what I've already made.
100%. I mean,
Yeah.
if you want to do something new and different, like yes, you can take your whole project that you're currently doing into a new direction. But if it's just something you want to try out, it's not a bad thing to just have a separate entity really be responsible for that. Because, you
Right.
don't want to be the person who's like, oh, like this time I'm making something that's like super like punk. And then the next time around, you're making something that's really like grunge, like that's I mean, those
Yeah.
are somewhat tangential, but something more in the hip hop space or something like that, for example. Like you don't want to just go in 10 different directions on one thing. You want to kind of cater it to one sort of general direction. So having a separate thing be what's essentially responsible for the other fun stuff, the other non branded things, it kind of even does you a favor. It's an extra project to deal with, but it allows a
Hmm.
little bit more freedom.
Exactly. Yeah.
When it comes to writing and creating your music, what do you find most often inspires your writing?
Um, I'm very stream of conscious, just kind of whatever comes to my head, I'll just go with it and then expand off of that. But as far as like stuff that makes me feel inspired to make music, it's a lot of films. And I would say a lot of films and like physical pieces of artwork, as it used to be other people's music. And I think now it's just like I overanalyze other people's music, even though I'll still listen. It's just harder to, because I think you start comparing yourself. And I'd rather not do that. I'd rather be inspired by like a completely different medium of art. Maybe like, like a Kubrick film or something like that.
There is definitely just an automatic sort of mentality of comparison when it comes to other music, even if it's different, like even if it's, apples and oranges, like there is always something that we try and compare from our work to somebody else's. It's like, oh, like I could have done this in my song more like what they did there, or like, they did this so
Hmm.
much better than like the style that I was, it's just you'll just be stuck in this constant loop of things if you continue to just channel in on that one thing. So expanding to other sources of inspiration definitely does you some favors, because you definitely cannot compare films to music, music to visual art, et cetera, et cetera. Like you can pair them up if you so please, music and movies, visuals can have their music representations, but you're far enough apart that you can't compare the two.
Right. Yeah. Can you still hear me well? Sorry, I took one of my
No,
AirPods out.
yeah, you're totally good.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, and to go off of that, I think a lot of um I think I've been really into wanting to score a film or um just kind of work in the music supervision part of the industry. And I think that's been helpful to separate, like the visual medium and the producing and songwriting stuff, and just kind of have those be two separate, I guess, entities as well, just different sources of inspiration.
Yeah, I mean, there's no wrong way to get inspiration, but you want to kind of avoid anything that's going to create this unfortunate mentality of, oh, this, that, and the other thing could be done better in what I'm doing. And especially if it all it takes is just kind of separating the two and having two different spaces for them both to exist, so be it. But
Hmm.
you gotta do what you can to still allow yourself to create successfully, and not in terms of like quality, but like accomplish the project and complete what you're working on, rather than get caught up in how much of it could be different and better and changed and whatnot. But yeah,
Right.
there's a limit to everything.
Yeah, totally.
If you had to create a new genre, around your style of music, what would you call it?
What would I call it? Um, if I were around my music, I don't know, but recently I thought of a new genre term that I think is coming out more and more just through TikTok and people being able to make indie music is
Mm-hmm.
a crindy, is cringe indie. And it's just the very shallow songwriting, like LA based indie artists whose parents have the Wikipedia pages. So crindy. I'm coining that.
Okay. I mean, the more you kind of expose yourself to all of the different aspects of TikTok music, you will start to find what will sustain itself and what will not.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
that's all I can say about that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
I think that
exactly.
there's, yeah, because that's what happens when you get social media to the degree in the way that it is. Like, like we've had, obviously social media has been around for a while, but TikTok is like been really just the last 5 years, maybe.
Hmm.
And like, so a lot of things, it's different. It's a video, short form video based app. We didn't really have that prior to this. And so
Yeah,
now that, video music, that you can have a lot of crossover there. And that's when you start to get into this. I think we're doing it for social media rather than doing it for the art form that it is, and stuff
right,
like that.
exactly.
So that's when you get into a little bit of
Exactly.
a unfortunate space. um
Well, and it's just crazy. You go from like Dark Side of the Moon in the 70s and like that being you listen to that all the way through every time you turn it on versus literally like 20-second videos on TikTok.
mhm.
And that's how much time you have to decide whether or not you like an artist versus like listening through an entire album. So I don't know why that happened, but our attention spans are just broken.
Yeah, that's, yeah, TikTok has its perks in terms of you can try and get people to want more with the little sections of it and everything, but there's also not everything out that not all the music that's on TikTok is going to be good music. And that's just, because people go from social media to music rather than using social media as an outlet for their music. That's
Right.
kind of where things get a little iffy. It's like, oh, now that TikTok's a thing, I can do this. It's like, if you didn't want to
Hmm.
do it in the first place, why now?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah. Is there a release that you think best embodies who you are as an artist? One song only. You have to show somebody to sell them on being your next fan, for example. What song do you show them?
Yeah. There's a song under my name. It's called "A Portrait of Time." I just really enjoy that song, and it's very cinematic. And I think that was kind of the one of the first tracks I made where I was really starting to move into, maybe not move into, but more understand like the impact that a song could have on a film and kind of what that would sound like and look like. Just very atmospheric. And I also like the songwriting a lot. Um, it's kind of just about time, but um, yeah, I was happy with that one. That's what I would show somebody, I think.
Do you think that that's a good representation of the rest of your catalog, for instance? Like, you have essentially just your one opportunity to basically be like, if you like this, you'll like at least most of everything else. Do you think that that kind of
I would
encapsulates in general?
No. What I would say is if you're able to like this song, then you're definitely able to like my other songs.
Okay.
Like it's kind of like a gate.
Mm,
Like if you can respect this and understand this, and you'll definitely like my other song.
it's the gateway track.
Yeah, the gateway track, exactly.
If you had to pick two or three artists that you think your music is like a combination of, who would it be?
Um, I've always been told Slow Dive, and I'm not too familiar with their catalog, but I've listened to a bit of that. And then James Blake, who I like a lot, but I actually never listened to him until my girlfriend was like, "You sound like James Blake, just the way you produce." And I was like, "Oh, okay." Um, and then I don't know if I've had many other comparisons. I know I try to sound like a lot of artists just through inspiration, but
Mm-hmm.
um, Slow Dive and James Blake, that would be my two.
What kind of about those two sticks out in a way of like what elements from either of them do you think shows through in your own music?
I think with Slow Dive, it's a lot of just the shoegaze and atmospheric guitar. Um, and I think a lot of the melodies are kind of similar to what I come up with. And then with James Blake, from a production standpoint, he also uses Logic. And I've noticed that like a lot of the, just presets that come with the program are recognizable, and just kind of the way that your brain functions while using Logic are kind of, I've noticed like his songs are very linear as are mine, where a lot of them like build up to a chorus at the end. And I think that's just uh like a product of using Logic. Just the way that it's formatted kind of makes you, I don't know, like what's the best way to word it? Like structure a song. Um, and I think with Ableton, I don't know if you produce in Ableton, but the way that you can just kind of like record a lot of different things and then print them when you want to, versus Logic being like, oh, you kind of have to record it like right now, is just makes for a different sound. And I also think his the way he uses analog synths and just a lot of atmospheric textures are kind of similar to what I do.
I've never really thought about Logic versus Ableton versus Pro Tools in that kind of way of like, oh, like it really kind of alters the way, not necessarily alters, but shapes the way you create. I use Logic. I know people that have used
Hmm.
Ableton. I know like I was taught Pro Tools in school and everything. And so like everybody, like to me it was always just, oh, everybody works a certain different way. And so like I tried Ableton. It was not for me. It was not the workflow that I was at all prepared to even try. Like it was not user friendly to me. Whereas other people are
Hmm.
like, Logic, like why? And then I'm like, well, that's easy for me. Like that's just like plug and play, move things, it works more for what I do. And so I've never really thought about it as far as like the song creation process of like how it kind of builds as things go. Cause I would agree I do the same kind of thing. It's that like we're like 75% of the way through and we're hitting that big point, and then, that's what you're kind of
Hmm.
building towards. Whereas, that, I mean, I will say the Ableton where you can just kind of do the little click drag, whatever it is to do the printing thing is just, yeah, that's one thing that I
Yeah.
would appreciate. But I never really thought about it as like that kind of, you can almost tell with the music who's using what and stuff like that. I'll have to pay more attention to
Yeah,
that.
totally. Yeah, it's
That's
interest
cool
it's interesting.
for sure.
I think he's the best example I could think of. But yeah, and I think a lot of it too is just being able to recognize. I mean, I've been using Logic for like almost 7 years, and so you can really start to recognize like a lot of the stock, drum
Hmm.
kits or
Yeah,
just
that
samples and
that
stuff.
I've picked up on. The I can hear when I'm
Yeah,
like, oh, that drum kit sounds painfully familiar, and some of the other
yeah.
little samples and things. I'm like, does this sound like it's a new thing to me, or does this sound like something I've tried out before? So,
Right.
what is an outside passion of yours that you think impacts who you are as an artist?
Um, just being from Colorado, I just really enjoy being outdoors and being inspired by nature. I know, very basic thing to say, but it is it is true to a certain extent. I think just having those moments of like sublime peace while just being on top of a mountain or by a river or something is just really helpful and calming of the mind and meditative. Um, I'm also, my girlfriend is in the film industry and she's kind of turned me on to a lot of, you know, films that I otherwise wouldn't have watched that also have just kind of shaped my concept of what art can be and what we can use art for. And so yeah, I would say a lot of films just have shaped my creativity.
I mean, it goes back to kind of what we talked about earlier with the source of inspiration being other art mediums and stuff like that. I mean, films are
Hmm.
just like these like I don't want to simplify it too much, but like essentially they're just like fancy storytelling in like this
Hmm.
like really creative, and I will never understand how they put together some of the things they put together as far as movies and such go. But I mean, it's art in a different way because like it's like music, you can tell that's art. Visual art, it's that is what you think of when you just hear art in itself. Films, it's like, part of it is like, okay, you think of this as, you go to a movie on a Sunday afternoon, it's entertainment more than it is like appreciating an art form. But it's like, there's a story there, there's something interesting going on,
Hmm.
that the way we interpret it and take it in is all based on how it's told and expressed, and the different the plenty of different things that are going on in there. Like you could change a couple minor details and a couple different even scenes, and the whole thing has changed. So it's a really
Yeah,
there's and with how long movies, I mean, there's a lot going on in an hour and 40 minutes or 2 hours even, like there's so much to it. So that makes sense. And also, nature's never a bad. I mean, everybody needs a nice little fresh air every once in a while. It's a great place to get some ideas.
yes, absolutely.
What is the ideal listening scenario for someone to consume your music in?
Ooh.
Like, if you had to
Well, I
set
always
this,
like listening. I always like listening to my music loud. Um, so I would say like a good, I mean, if you have access to good studio monitors, that's what I'm mixing on most of the time. And that's, how ideally I would want it to sound to other people. Adams T7s. Um, but other than that, I like a I like a good car stereo with a little bit of sub and just hanging out with your friends in a good atmosphere.
Everything's good in the car, right?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
What is it that you think sets you apart from other independent artists?
Mm, I don't know if there's one thing other than just every single human is different and I'm different than you, you know, everybody is uniquely different, and I think that's what sets everyone apart. And whether or not you want to hear what I have to say, my thoughts about things, I guess that's what sets me apart, is that everybody's brain works differently.
If you were to kind of take it into like a, the current music landscape, if you will, what is it that coming across any of your stuff or you as an coming across anything about you as an artist, what is it about that would make me see you as different than the next guy? If if that makes the question any more
No,
definitive.
I know what you mean. Yeah, yeah. Um, I guess it's just um it's just a lot, it's a mix of a lot of different inspirations and elements. I grew up when I first started producing, I was into like John Bellion and stuff, and then I really got into EDM, like hard EDM, like RL Grime and like Troy Boy and just kind of like trappy and big synths. And I think that really shaped how I produced and how I use energy in a song. And then kind of after that, I transitioned into more like Bon Iver and Tame Impala type, psychedelic folk rock. And I think the combination of those two is something we haven't seen a lot of. And I kind of want to make the perfect combination of that.
Two very different sounds, you're right. So a combination of those
Mhm.
two, if done well, would be really cool because,
Right.
there's a lot of different, like both are more showing it than others. Both are very production heavy in terms of how they're executed, but just one is very obvious and one is more subtle.
Hmm.
And so kind of finding that
Exactly.
balance is really cool.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. It's one is very obvious. It's like, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
What impact do you want to have with your music and with your artistry?
I don't think I have anything specific in mind other than just I hope I can be the artist for somebody else that like, that Pink Floyd was to me or like Flume was to me, to where it's like my mind just got blown. Like watching Flume's visualizer and listening to his album and just being like, I didn't know you could do this. And like, this is what like art is just pure creative freedom and just doing whatever you want and hopefully eventually making money off of it so you could survive. Um, just being one of those artists that opens somebody else's mind, I guess, to new ideas.
I mean, I've noticed that as kind of a trend around this idea is it's like the way that music has impacted us as individuals and turned us into the creatives that we are is ultimately the way we want to kind of have that be expressed and exerted out of our own creative work. It's like, like
Hmm.
music changed my life, so I hope my music can change someone else's.
Exactly.
It's just passing the
Yeah.
torch, which is really cool.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And it's especially like I think at a live show experience, if I'm sure you've had that where it's just like it really just changed your life. Like you saw a certain show and you're like, wow, like, and it's just a great environment and there's a lot of camaraderie and you just want to be around people and experience like a beautiful thing together. And it's literally just sound. And that's so cool. So, yeah, like you said, just passing that torch on.
Yeah, it is crazy. I mean, you can experience music till you're blue in the face, like digitally, but then like seeing something, especially something you're like super passionate about live, like,
Hmm.
seeing your favorite artist live, it's like that's like then it's like real. It's not like
Hmm.
just this like sound file floating on Spotify for you anymore. It's a real like you're however far away from the person who's responsible for all that. It's crazy.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's so cool.
I think that brings us to our last question, which is ultimately why music?
I see. Um, I think music and just any other form of art is just uh it's just a great release. I think this world is so crazy right now and in the technological age it's just such a release to sit down with a guitar and just kind of get into a meditative space. Why music for me personally is just because I never saw any other option. I don't think I it's just what I'm passionate about and what I'm drawn to and it's like something that makes me super happy and yeah, it's really cool and I'll never understand how it works and why it affects the brain the way it does. And I think that's a cool mystery to just keep exploring.
No, it really is like as much as close as we can get being creators of music, no one will ever entirely understand how it can have the effect that it does in all the ways that it does. It's yeah, like you can understand it to its core, but it's just like there's something about it that's just this unspoken
It's
impactful idea.
existential.
100%.
Hmm. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
crazy.
It's beyond anything tangible for sure.
100%. I think that brings us to the end of this episode of the Why Music podcast. Check back again next week for another conversation with another independent artist. Thanks for listening.